Hi, I'm Ivy Griffin from Thrive with Sensitivity, and I'm a licensed mental health therapist, a clinical supervisor, a director of a team of private practice therapists, and I specialize with supporting highly sensitive therapists and providing training to them as well. So today I want to talk about coping with work when life is wearing you down. I think as humans, we all know the heaviness of feeling completely worn out. We've been there before, we might be there right now, or we'll be there again. As Hemingway wrote, the world breaks everyone. And we know, especially as therapists, that being human means experiencing loss and struggle. We know that there'll be times where life goes along smoothly and with ease, and then there'll be times when it's all we can do to inch our way forward. And then, of course, as highly sensitive therapists and people, our natures are especially impacted when we're consumed with struggle. I know for me, there have been times when I've been wrapped in depression. There's been days and weeks and sometimes months of anxiety. I've had my own struggles in family relationships and friendships, sometimes friendships ending, deep grief with the loss of some loved ones. The point is we all have our stories. We all have our pain that we carry. I know right now, so many sensitive therapists are feeling our own feelings about the chaos, upset, and losses to human rights and the uncertainty in our country's political climate. Simultaneously, we're holding space to support our clients in all the ways they're struggling. And that may also be fears of ICE, worries about the economy, anger about the losses for DEI or LGBTQ plus rights or women's rights, or even concern about whether we're going to still have a democracy, right? It is a lot. Plus, when clients' current fears and stressors mirror our own, it's especially tough to cope with. I think many of us found this in 2020 when lockdown happened and COVID was going strong. So all this said, as psychotherapists, we're trained in compartmentalization, and we can be pretty skilled at staying client centered, ignoring our needs in order to be present with a client, processing when we have countertransference, consulting, doing all the things. And we can even be pretty good at leaving work at the end of the day. And of course, depending on when we went to grad school, we might have also been taught the whole blank slate mentality when we show up with clients. The problem, though, is that all of this focus and compartmentalization takes a lot of effort in normal times, right? Even when we're doing well, as sensitive therapists, it takes a lot of energy for us to juggle all of this. And then it takes tremendous effort, energy, and emotion to manage it when we already feel exhausted and worn down by life. Plus, add to this how, as highly sensitive therapists, we don't usually have the same capacity as other colleagues who aren't as highly sensitive. Even in great times, we need to see fewer clients, we need to take more breaks, and we usually need to work fewer hours to not burn out. And I want to say to you, these things are totally okay. It really is. Please know that we are not flawed or less than because we're sensitive, and we have to really attune to those needs to be able to do this work of therapy. We're simply sensitive people who are also therapists, and in some ways, it works really well for us. But I also know if you're feeling this sense of being worn down, and if you're anything like me, the next question is, but what do we do? How do we cope? How do we manage in this time? How do we take care of ourselves and still show up for work and our clients when we're in pain? So I've got a few, tips and ideas of things that work for me. And I also want to give the disclaimer that these tips are very much about focused on ourselves on an individual level, and they don't go into dealing with political chaos. I think there's overlap. Sometimes we really do have to come back to ourselves, but there can also be other actions to take on a political level. But we're not going into that today. So, number one, when life is wearing us down, I think if it's possible and if it seems helpful to you, take some time off of work. I know for me, having time when I'm not responsible for clients gives me a much needed emotional and mental break. It's like I get to turn that part of my brain off and just be a person for a little while. And then with that time, it helps to have space to slow down, to cry, maybe journal, maybe meditate, read, maybe talk with others about it. Probably definitely binge watch a drama that I can really like lose myself in. Um, and I also know it's not always realistic for us to take time off work. Or even if you do, depending on your life and your responsibilities, there may be many other things that you need to manage and it doesn't give you the full break that you desire. So really consider what is doable for you. If a day or a week isn't manageable to take off, look for the little moments where you can give yourself a break. Can you take a longer lunch break, right? Can you end work half an hour early or start a little late on Monday or leave a little early on Friday? Look for those cracks in your day where you can give yourself a little more time and a little more of a break. Another tip is to really try to accept this season, and I like to remember that accepting does not mean that we have to like it or that we have to agree with it, right? It's just about acknowledging the reality because we all go through ups and downs, seasons come and go. We know this, we know things change, right? And acceptance also means that you don't have to be your best self right now, right? It's normal to need to ease up. You can write some shorter progress notes, right? Let it take you another day to return that phone call or return an email. You might need to do takeout for dinner again, right? Accept that life in this difficult time is going to look different, and that's okay. And it's not a reflection of who you are or how much you care. Another idea is to just move a little more slowly because this is something we can incorporate into whatever we're doing when we feel worn down. We can walk at a slower pace. I know for me, I can be a fast walker. So sometimes to just like slow down a little bit, take some pressure off. We can build in a couple of minutes for transition between things. Sit in your car and listen to some music or just breathe for a minute before you head into the next thing. Even take a moment before you head inside after work to just come back to yourself, feel your feet planted on the ground. Even do some stretching, take an easygoing walk. But remember that you don't have to keep up your usual pace when you're feeling worn down. And then again, this is kind of a basic, but I find it so helpful to just allow time for rest, especially trying to build in more time for sleep. As sensitive souls, we tend to need more sleep than the average person anyway. And I find this especially true when I'm struggling. So, let yourself take a nap when you have a cancellation, or close your eyes for a few minutes in between sessions, right? Or go to bed early, sleep a little later, right? And even the act of like not taking in information, not being in your email, not scrolling, but even just like sitting and closing your eyes can just be a way to soothe because we do get so overwhelmed with our sensitive natures and all the information that's around us all the time. Going back to where we started, the rest of that line from farewell to arms is, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. And it's like, don't we see this all the time in our therapy rooms? We sit with clients in the pain and the struggle and the muck and the darkness, usually for a whole lot longer than anybody would ever choose to be there. And it can be surrounded by uncertainty of where they're going, where the path even is. And then, like, slowly, gradually we start to see some shifts, right? There's a little more light, right? The client found some joy. Maybe the ground feels a little more firm. And over time, people move through the storm and they emerge with more strength and resources than they had before. We're therapists. We've seen this. We know it's true. And as sensitive therapists, we often forget to give ourselves the same care and compassion that we share with our clients. So, my message to you today is that it is okay for us to be in the thick of it because we're human, right? It's okay for things to be hard. And my invitation is that the next time you find yourself feeling really worn down, even if that's like right now, today, ask what it would look like to show up for yourself the same way that you show up for your clients. Because I know, and you know, you deserve it. You deserve that care. And I would also love